Do you ever have those days where you sit on the couch and you rediscover or you realize why you love a sport? Well, today was one of those days, man. I sat on the couch today and watched a ton of basketball, particularly college basketball. And boy, oh boy, what a Saturday it was in college basketball. It's about this time of year where I really start to lock in. Late January going into February. And then you're a month away from what I think is the greatest postseason tournament there is in sports. So it was a great Saturday in college basketball, and it's an even better Saturday next weekend. I'll tell you about that a little later on in the show when we're about to get out of here. But welcome in, everybody, here on a Saturday night, January 27th, 10 p.m. My name's Michael Wein. This is Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. And with all that being said, we have a loaded show today, and I'm going to welcome in my esteemed guest and fellow Texas fan, Emmy Nixon. What's up, man?
Nothing much. I was trying to watch Texas BYU earlier. I turned on the game like late in the second half. Down by the team was down by like 8 or 9. Wasn't able to watch much because I was at work. But yeah, I'll have to tune into some of the college basketball from today a little bit later on. But I'm excited about today's episode. This is the episode we've been kind of waiting on for a while. We've been kind of hinting at, covering college baseball for a while between you and me and our conversations. So this will be the start of that. This is going to be kind of a landmark moment of this podcast. This is the first college baseball episode.
Yeah, we've got our first part of our Texas baseball preview. We're going to cover a lot of questions about this roster, good, bad, question marks. We'll cover all of it. And then in the second half of the show, we're going to talk about the 2025 recruiting cycle for football. Texas already has 5 commits. We'll talk about those commits and what they mean. And then I'm going to tell you guys who my in-state targets are. My 5 most wanted in-state targets for the class of 2025 in the state of Texas. We're not talking about prospects in other states. Just in-state for today. And this will start a series of recruiting segments here on this show that are Texas-related. The second National Signing Day for the 2024 class is coming up here in like a week and a half. So eventually, we're going to do some grades from a Texas standpoint for the 2024 class, where we'll go position by position and we'll grade Texas's haul in that class. And then we'll continue to cover the 2025 class as it starts to build throughout the month of February. We'll probably take a pause from recruiting in March, as there will be draft stuff and March Madness. But then we'll pick it back up once we get through March Madness. And, we'll mix in some recruiting stuff with our continued draft, pre-draft content. And spring football. So it's going to be busy times, even though there are no Texas football games. So with all that, let's get started. Man, where do we start? I wanted to kind of push this in a certain direction. I have some questions for us to answer about this Texas roster going into the 2024 college baseball season. Just real fast. I think it would be good to kind of remember where this Texas team finished last year. They were 42-22 overall. They went 15-9 in conference play in the regular season. And they made it to the Super Regional and lost to Stanford in 3 games. But this year's team comes into this season ranked number 16 preseason, and they're picked number 2 preseason in the Big 12 Conference, which is a very good baseball conference, just behind TCU, who comes in as the best team preseason in the conference at number 5 overall in the rankings. I think people expect pretty big things for this Texas team, and for good reason. They're a team that I think is expected to compete, to go to Omaha, to get back to Omaha, which has been an expectation for this program under David Pierce, going back to their days under Augie Garrido and Gus before that. So um, I'm really excited for this season. Emmy, what are your initial feelings on this 2024 Texas baseball team in this upcoming season overall? Are you excited? Are you excited to get into this content? What are your feelings about this?
Yeah, I'm extremely excited. I actually live about 10 minutes from the stadium, so I'm going to be attending a few games this year, most likely, and I'm just excited to dive into this because I think it might be easier to cover Texas baseball, like just this one team, and get into all the nitty gritty details um, of this team rather than what we do with MLB, which is more big picture. We don't really cover like, oh, this pitcher has this pitch in this situation, yada yada yada. I think for this coverage, I think we'll be able to get a little bit deeper, which I'm excited for.
Yeah, we're going to get into the weeds, pretty deep into the weeds of this Texas baseball team. This is probably my second full season. It will be my second full season following Texas baseball. Really, second and a half season following Texas baseball. Obviously, they play at the Dish, and I'm excited to hopefully make it out to a couple games. Maybe we both can make it out to a couple games this year at the Dish. That'd be really fun,
Yeah.
especially since it is the last year in the Big 12 for
Yeah.
Texas. They're going to welcome in a lot of these teams for the last time and hopefully beat them. So, my first question that I had that I want to answer about this preseason top 25 ranked Texas team is, what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses? Let's start with strengths. What do you think this team's strengths are based off your initial read?
Well, I think that one of the strengths is experience. We have a lot of guys that came back, and guys coming in the transfer portal who are also experienced as well. So LeBaron Johnson and uh, Tanner Witt, all those guys coming back, I think um, that's going to be a big deal for this team. Like there's not a lot of teams in baseball that have in college baseball that have more experience in the Texas Longhorns.
Yeah, I think when you look at this team, I think this is a team that could have an elite weekend rotation. Um, Now, we're going to talk about Tanner Witt in depth in this episode, but when you look at LeBaron Johnson Jr., who was just earlier this week predicted to be the Big 12 Conference Pitcher of the Year preseason, and who had a great year last year. When you look at Tanner Witt, who's coming back, he's got experience, although last year we'll talk about it later. And then Charlie Hurley as that Sunday guy who really came into his own and is coming off a solid 2023 campaign himself. If all those guys kind of meet their expectations going into this year, and Charlie Hurley improves into that really solidified number 3 guy, this could be an elite starting rotation for Texas. And pitching is so important. Um, I think the other strength of this team is going to be obviously their nucleus offensively. Last year there was a lot of turnover in this lineup. I mean, they lost the Hispanic Titanic. They lost a bunch of key pieces, and they were a young team last year. Uh, this year, you have Peyton Powell returning. You've got Jared Thomas, who was a really productive player, returning, and Porter Brown, who was a TCU transfer from a year ago. He's coming back. They're all proven. They're all accomplished, and they're all excellent hitters. And so I think that nucleus offensively, add in a couple transfers, returning starters at second base, shortstop, and third base. I think that strong nucleus on offense, those strong nucleus of bats, along with the starting rotation, could be real strong points for this Texas team going into 2024, as we're about little less than 3 weeks from first pitch. Now, what about weaknesses? Do you see any weaknesses or holes in this roster that you want to address,
Um,
or just question marks overall?
Not really anything in particular. No.
My one question, and obviously we'll get into X factors and breakout players here in a second, but my one, not necessarily weak point, but question mark for this team will be how good can this bullpen be? The bullpen was kind of an issue at times last year, but they have some guys coming back in this bullpen. It's just a matter of, who steps up. They're going to need, I think, a couple guys to step up in the bullpen. I think it could be a good bullpen, but I think they're going to need a couple guys to step up if this bullpen really wants to reach its potential. And hopefully some of the arms that are in this bullpen can stay healthy. That's obviously always a big question mark in baseball. But some big names in their bullpen got hurt last year. David Shaw, who's going to be their closer this year, he got hurt. And that really hurt their depth in that bullpen. So I think the bullpen has some question marks, but the complexion of this team dramatically changes in a good way if the bullpen lives up to expectation. So that's a good baseline. That's a good baseline starting point for this conversation. Let's talk about the X factor for this season, in my opinion, and that is Tanner Witt. Tanner Witt is my number one X factor and possibly the biggest question mark for this 2024 season. What is Texas going to get out of this talented right-hander? Tanner Witt is a guy who's been at Texas for a while. He absolutely loves Texas. He wants to win badly, and there's no questioning that. He's an extremely hard worker, very determined to succeed. But what remains to be seen is how he'll perform on the mound in 2024, because he appeared in limited time last year, at the end of last year, coming off a Tommy John surgery recovery, and his velo and command of the fastball were noticeably off. It wasn't Tanner Witt from the past couple of years before last season. He finished last year with a 10.97 ERA and a 1.78 whip. And whip, by the way, is walks and hits allowed per inning. WHIP, in case you don't know what that stands for. The lower your whip, the better. So he was giving up almost 2 walks and hits per inning. It'll be interesting to see what he can do. I have high expectations for Tanner Witt. I think you're going to see some of that velocity come back. I think he's worked hard over the offseason. And I think he's going to be kind of that key to unlocking the potential of this Texas team. If they can get elite Tanner Witt with what we expect from LBJ as the number one guy, this Texas team will be dangerous because they'll have 3 really, really solid starting pitchers. And if you can have, those shutdown performances early on in these weekend series, it takes a lot of the pressure off your offense. Tanner Witt's done it before. It's not like this is a guy who, he's a freshman and he had Tommy John and he hasn't proven himself. He has experience. He has all the tools. But, different pitchers react differently to this surgery. And so it'll just be interesting to see how he performs in his first full season with a full off season to recover.
Yeah, I think with those super, I guess, severe injuries, really in any sport, it's more so like a mental block that you have to get over. And I think with Tanner Witt, it's no different. I think that just takes time. I think there's, a lot of things that were pointing in the right direction, though, in terms of him getting back to where he was. I think there's there's a level that he can reach in terms of getting back to where he was, and with the off-speed pitches in particular. I think the command with the fastball, I think that'll come back once his arm is feeling where he wants it to. Like it's like a certain feel that you want to have in your arm. I think in order just to have 100% confidence that you're going to be able to, you know, go full bore with it and not, hurt something.
Right. Yeah, I think he's the X factor for this team, at least from the pitching standpoint. I'll tell you who my breakout player is. I don't know if you have one in mind, but I do. My breakout player for 2024 is going to be shortstop Jalen Flores. Flores, you know, he was a freshman last year, and he split time with Mitch Daly, who graduated last year, and kind of struggled at the plate. Just batted 175 and 103 total at bats. But I believe he's going to take the next step this year. He's got really nice tools, ability to hit it to all fields, sneaky good pull side power. He can hit it out of the ballpark. I think from a power perspective, he could be a guy that reaches that 10 home run mark from the shortstop position, which would be huge for Texas. And its production they really didn't get from that position last year. But I think the biggest thing for him will be continuing to develop that patience at the plate. Last year, he had a tendency to reach on pitches that ran outside, down and out. So I think if he develops the eye and the more experience that he, gets, I think he'll start to work his walks, and he's going to run into some. And he can hit to all fields. And I really like him defensively. Like defensively, that's not the issue. He's a really nice, intriguing player. And I think it just sometimes takes time, especially at the shortstop position, to develop.
Yeah.
One of the toughest, if not the toughest position to play. So I have my eye on Jalen Flores. I think he's going to be a breakout candidate for this Texas team. Did you have anyone in mind, or do
Yeah,
you have anyone in
I
mind?
was thinking the same thing. I think with him being just a sophomore, that kind of second year jump, if you will, is kind of natural almost. I think there's definitely, once you get experienced in college baseball and get your feet wet a little bit, I think you start seeing pitches and you have a better feel for things. So I definitely think he'll be more efficient at the plate this year. I don't know about 10 home runs. I think he could reach that for sure. But it's more so about being patient, as you said, and just really grinding out at bats.
Right. I'll tell you who my most intriguing player that I'm watching this year is. It's going to be Will Gasparino. Now, if you don't know who that is, he is the top player in this freshman class for Texas in the 2023 signing class. He is a top 100 MLB prospect coming out of high school, and he has some of the loudest tools on this team. He's got excellent speed. He's got super raw power and an extremely strong arm. He's going to play outfield. I think he's viewed as a day one starter. He's about 6'6". He has that presence in the box as a freshman. His dad is actually, I believe, the director of pro personnel for the Los Angeles Dodgers. So he's been out in LA. He's from Harvard Westlake High School out in Los Angeles, California. ties to the Dodgers organization. Parents were really good athletes. He's got a bunch of tools. Um, I think he'll have some work to do in adjusting to playing the outfield, adjusting to hits, and the ball coming off the bat at the college level. But he's got all the tools to be an excellent player. And so I really have my eye on Will Gasparino, the top freshman on this Texas team in 2024. And I also have my eye on, I think, the star of this team, and that's LBJ, who's going to be the ace of this team. Um, you know, he was a guy who really came on at the end of last year. Obviously, through the complete game in the Coral Gables regional against Miami. And he was a workhorse last year for Texas. He finished with a 2.91 ERA, a 1.28 WHIP, and an 8-4 overall record. And it doesn't really take much imagination to see him improving on that in 2024 as he takes the reins as the number one guy on this staff. Has a great presence on the mound. And, if he can put in some performances like he had against Miami last year in the Coral Gables regional, he'll be one of the better pitchers in the country, period.
Yeah, definitely. I think last year going into the postseason, the pitching was really the question mark. That was really what you went into it thinking. Okay, if Texas doesn't make it far, it'll be because of the pitching. But they were able to get really like length out of like some of the guys that we weren't really expecting it from, and that's what
Yeah.
was the catalyst in terms of them going far. So this year, come this time around, those same guys, they're more experienced, and they know they can do it. That's half the battle almost. Knowing you can do it once you get to the biggest stage. At that point, no stage is too big for you.
Yeah, 2 years ago, this team made Omaha. They reached the College World Series with that elite rotation of Ty Madden leading the charge. And then Ty Madden goes off to MLB, and he's replaced by Lucas Gordon, who was the number one guy last year. And then this year, LeBron Johnson will be the guy who's expected to fill in as the ace for Lucas Gordon, who went off to the minor league. So it's exciting. This team is really exciting. I think they have real potential to make a run at Omaha this year. Obviously, they need some things to fall in place, but I think their floor is really kind of like a top 20-ish team, as long as they stay healthy. They've got a lot of talent. I really like this offense. I mean, these bats are going to be, I think, really good. I love how they have that returning nucleus on offense, something they didn't really have, at least to this extent, last year. And I think you'll see Tanner Witt kind of come into his own. He might start a little slow, but I think you'll see him get better as the season progresses. I'm really high on a guy like Charlie Hurley. He's got really good pitches, a presence on the mound, and was really good last year. He went 5-0 as a starter last year. Finished with like a 4+ ERA, but I think that'll come down. Just the natural progression of a pitcher. But the Big 12 Conference isn't going to be easy, and Texas has some challenges in non-conference, which I think will be fun games to watch. They start out the season 3 games at Dish Falk against San Diego, and then they'll play some other top 25 teams in non-con. They're going to play LSU at Minute Maid. They're going to play Texas State at Minute Maid. They're also going to play Vanderbilt at Minute Maid. They'll get Texas A&M to come to Dish Falk. in the non-con before that rivalry gets renewed officially next year. And they'll also play another top 25 caliber team in Washington for 3 games in the non-conference. So it's not going to be it's not an easy schedule. They're going to play 10 conference series in 2024. That's an increase from 8 in prior years. The 2 teams that they're not going to play in conference are Cincinnati and West Virginia, with the new teams joining the Big 12. But, that means they're going to play, of course, 2 less non-conference series. So it'll be 30 total conference games and 26 non-conference games for a total of 56 total games. But, I think they have a good blend of home and away during conference play. Of the perceived top 6 teams in the Big 12, they face 3 of them at home and 3 of them on the road. So good balance. And then looking at, the non-conference schedule, they're not going to have some of the same concerns that people had about Texas last year in terms of strength of schedule and RPI, because, I think this 2024 schedule, especially in the non-conference, is going to be challenging. They're going to be challenged early, but I'm super excited to see them. The first week or 2 of March, they're going to get to play 5 top 25 squads: LSU, Vandy, Texas A&M, Texas Tech, and Washington. It's going to be fun. And then later on in conference play, you get to play TCU, Oklahoma, and Oklahoma State, who are all predicted to finish in the top half of the Big 12. So I'm really excited about this schedule, and just excited for the season overall. So any final thoughts as we kind of wrap up our first, not our last, but first initial conversation of Texas baseball for the season?
Well, you mentioned the schedule. There was a nugget from the podcast that I listened to with David Pierce, and he mentioned he wanted to have like a wide variety of different style of baseball come in the non-conference. San Jose State, you mentioned Washington, of course, Texas A&M. I think that'll pay dividends moving forward. Whether or not you go and win most of these games, hopefully you do. But as long as you're 3, 4, 5 games above 500, then you'll be in a good spot.
Yeah. So we're going to get deeper into the roster before the season starts, but I believe that was a good start to this. We'll be covering Texas baseball in depth through the rest of the preseason, into the regular season, and of course into the postseason, where Texas hopefully can get back to Omaha. I think for the Texas baseball program, one of the more successful college baseball programs of all time, that should be the expectation every year. They're, of course, not going to reach that every year, but, under David Pierce, they've already made it 3 or 4 times. So I expect big things for Texas in 2024. Okay. With that, we can transition. I think we're at a perfect point here, 30 minutes in, to some recruiting stuff. I'm really excited for this. I don't know about you, but I'm really excited for this. Gosh, where do we even start? Have you gotten to look much at who Texas has signed in 2025 yet? Not really.
Very limited.
Very
Like
little.
I've looked at a few of. They signed a quarterback, I think.
Yeah, so I can start us off while you look into that. They have 5 commits so far in 2025, and I kind of ranked them in order of how excited I am for their commitments. They don't have anyone signed yet because, of course, that's a long way down the road. But these 5 players are committed. They've got KJ Lacey, quarterback from Saraland High School in Saraland, Alabama. They've got, or just recently picked up, Lance Jackson, uh, the athlete out of Texarkana, Texas, Pleasant Grove High School. I'll talk about him here in a second. Brandon Brown, a 4-star defensive tackle from Palm Bay, Florida at Ugali High School. Amari Winston, tight end / H-back from Calhoun, Georgia. Texas goes into Georgia and picks up a really intriguing guy. And then Anthony Deuce Williams, a linebacker from Pearland, Texas at Shadow Creek High School. Those I mentioned those in order of how excited I am for each of them. And so, why don't we do this? You ask me questions, and I'll answer them.
All right. Yeah. I'll start with this. The tight end that was brought in, 6'1", 235. What do you think is his best trait as a player? Let's start with that.
Well, Amari Winston is a very versatile player. He's kind of in that H-back mold. But I think his versatility is probably his best trait. I think also he's really good at catching the ball in traffic and, just has really good hands in general. But I think this is a guy that Sark will get creative with. I really like him. He's got good athleticism, catches the ball in and out of traffic. And I think if Sark wants to, he can use him as kind of a big, short yardage running back, or even keep him in as a blocker, because I think he's got room, of course, to fill out in his frame. And you could even use him at Wildcat quarterback if he wanted to. He's kind of a unique player. If you watch him on tape, he played some running back in high school. He's obviously not going to play running back at Texas, but they could use him kind of in like a halfback kind of way. Really good at catching the ball, though. And this will be a year where I think you'll see Texas take 2 tight ends in this recruiting class. They didn't take any in 2024. So I think you're really going to see Amari Winston maybe possibly make an impact early just because of all the things he can do on a football field.
Yeah, I mean that's extremely unique. Wildcat, running back. Seems like someone who has speed and just I don't know. 235 seems like a little bit low for a tight end, but I think there's definitely still time for him to fill out. And by the time he gets to Texas, he'll probably be over 250. Now let's move on to KJ Lacey. I heard about this commit when it first happened. He's from Alabama, and that was the big storyline there. The fact that Sark was able to go into Alabama and steal this guy from there. What do you think about his traits as a quarterback?
Yeah, KJ Lacey committed to Texas in early July of 2023, a year and a half before his actual signing day, this upcoming December. And he's stuck with that commitment pretty firm so far. Now, Alabama is in hot pursuit, of course, as they are the in-state school. And his top receiver, who reclassified from the 25 class to the 24 class, you may have heard about this just in passing, Ryan Williams, who's the best receiving prospect in the 2024 class now that he reclassified. It originally committed to Alabama, then decommitted once Saban retired, and now has recommitted to Kalen DeBoer. Of course, he's going to be recruiting him because they play at the same high school. But Alabama's in hot pursuit. I think that's something to watch. But he's been firm in his commitment to Texas. As a player, though, to your original question, I see a lot of similarities to Bryce Young on tape. He's got an extremely quick release. Can throw the ball all over the field from an endless array of arm angles. He can change his arm angles and throw, and he's really good making plays off script. And he sees the field extremely well. You should go watch this kid's huddle tape. It's really fun to watch. He's obviously a little small, which is where some of the Bryce Young similarities come into play. He keeps his eyes downfield, and he's really good moving within the pocket. I think he's a guy who will come in next year, probably redshirt, behind Arch Manning and Trey Owens, who's the quarterback for the 2024 class. But I think by 2026, he could be competing for a starting job, or 2027 once likely Arch leaves. I think he's going to possibly finish this cycle as a 5-star. He's that talented. I kind of see him in. I'm not saying he's Bryce Young, but I think if he were to reach his full potential, he would be something along those lines.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, at 6 foot, 170, I would think at that size you would need to have that playmaking ability. So that's good to hear that he's able to make plays outside the pocket based on what you're saying. I mean, he's going to have to be able to, see over, the trees in that pocket or be able to, extend. So
he can make all the throws, really talented. He's not like Quinn Ewers possibly was the best arm talent coming out of high school that we've ever seen. He's not Quinn Ewers in that respect, but he's got an arm for a smaller guy. Go watch his huddle tape. It's really, really fun to watch. Any other questions?
Let's see here. Sorry, my tab got thrown off. Sorry. Okay. One last one. Okay. So we got a couple of D-line guys. One 4-star, one 3-star. Lance Jackson at 6'5", 245. What did you see from him? Was he mostly playing inside? I'm guessing on the interior. Like what were his main traits as a player?
Well, Lance Jackson is a really exciting commitment. This one just happened last week after Texas's junior day, where they had over 100 recruits on campus for the Baylor basketball game and some other events. It was a big recruiting weekend last weekend, and Lance Jackson was a guy that committed right after his visit. He's a guy who in high school was a tight end and played edge. He's going to play edge for Texas. And I think he's a top 20 player in the state of Texas for this cycle. He's a really exciting commitment. I think you could even make the argument. I could even make an argument. I'm more excited about him than I am about KJ Lacey. As far as a player, long arms, powerful, and he's dripping with athletic upside. His brother, Landon Jackson, was one of the better edge rushers in the SEC this past season at Arkansas after he originally committed to LSU. You rarely see this combination of coordination and athleticism from an edge coming out of high school, but he's got it. He's got room to fill out, but he's got an excellent frame. And when you watch him on tape, his lower half moves harmoniously with his upper half. And he's just disruptive from the edge position. I think he's going to be an instant impact guy. Like year one, he will be playing for this Texas team. And I think he's going to end up, like of all 5 of these guys, he might have the most potential to be an NFL player. His profile of prospect makes the NFL at almost a 70% clip in the state of Texas.
Wow.
So he is dripping, and he's got NFL all written all over him, kind of like Colin Simmons does. This is a big commit. People have said within the industry, if he wanted to, he can make the NFL as a tight end or an edge. But of course, Texas is going to use him as an edge, and that's the position he wants to play. But if you go watch his highlights, he makes some. I mean, he kind of looks like JT Sanders as a tight end. Yeah. I think he could end up as a 5-star guy, or at least a borderline 5-star guy. Right now, he's kind of a high 4-star kind of guy. He will be a super blue chip. And this was an excellent pickup for this Texas staff and Pete Kwiatkowski.
Yeah. My last question on him, you mentioned his brother at Arkansas. What do you think are the chances he ends up at Arkansas? Because I'm seeing some of the 24/7 names have him. Their experts have him ending up at Arkansas in the end.
I don't think he's going to end up at Arkansas unless something drastically changes. You rarely commit to a school this early without really knowing that you want to play for that school. I think he's going to stay at Texas, and the NIL opportunities at Texas are unmatched. So I don't think it'd be a very big surprise if he ended up at Arkansas. With the uncertainty around Sam Pittman's future at that school, and they're kind of in a slow rebuild, I don't know that he'll end up at Arkansas. I'd be very surprised.
Okay. Yeah.
This Texas staff is going to do everything that they have to do to keep him in this 25 class. He's, I think, one of the more important prospects.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, anytime you get an edge rusher with that type of upside, I mean, it's huge. I mean, the edge talent we see on the best teams in college football every year. Like, it seems like every single team that wins the national championship has at least one first-round pick on the D line, and that's like at minimum. Like, there's usually 3 or 4.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on to. Do you have questions about players that I think Texas needs to get in this 25 class, or positions they need to target? Because I have a list of 5 guys that I really want. Like, it's like my wish list. But you take this conversation wherever you want it to go.
Okay. Well, I think my question to you would be, obviously this class is going to be very crucial in pairing with Arch Manning and being able to, fill in gaps for, seniors that are going to be leaving next year. But is there any, weapons, offensive weapons for Arch that you have your eye on?
Oh, there's a ton. That's a loaded question, but I will mention the number one. The guy I want is DeCorian Moore. DeCorian Moore out of Duncanville High School is a wide receiver, 5-star wide receiver.
What's that name again? Duncanville.
DeCorian Moore. Some people call him DK Moore. Consensus 5-star wide receiver, and the top receiver, not only in the state of Texas, but probably overall in the 2025 class. A class that's pretty loaded at wide receiver, especially in the state of Texas. Right now, he is committed to LSU, but Texas and Oregon are in hot pursuit. Of course, Texas and Oregon being big players in NIL right now, in the recruiting space and in the transfer portal. DeCorian Moore, you have to go watch his highlights for it to do it justice, but he's got that multi-sport profile as kind of like a track football guy. Um, he's a big play wide receiver, excellent downfield ball tracking skills and concentration, excellent body control, run after catch ability, super athletic, just an all around, really, really good receiver. And I want him in a Sark offense, please. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He's 6 foot, but he's got elite skills that make up for his size, quickness, athleticism, everything. And I think you get him under Chris Jackson, a guy who knows what it takes to do it at the NFL level, as he's coached at the NFL level, and you put him in Stark's offense, pair him with Arch. He could play right away. I think he's the guy. And Texas is working to try to flip his commitment as we speak.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely a huge battle. I think so. As of right now, so he's set to make his decision on, like, he's gonna like be later on, most likely. I'm guessing
Well, we don't know.
in terms of
He's committed to LSU.
okay.
So, I mean, as long as he feels comfortable with LSU, he's going to stay committed to LSU. But one thing we've said with Sark and this staff is they've been extremely patient. There's a reason. I mean, if Texas wanted to, they could go out and they could fill up a class of 2025 prospects in 2 weeks with just ordinary guys. But that's not Texas. They want the best of the best. And so they're going to be patient. They're going to wait for the guys that they really, really want. They're going to try to get those guys and then go from there. And Decorian Moore is at the top of their list. I think you could probably see him flip sometime late spring, summertime is hopefully when that will occur. Obviously, signing day isn't until December. I think either way, this is a recruitment that's going to go down to the finish line, kind of like Ryan Wingo's recruitment. We saw, on early signing day, there was a little bit of uncertainty with Missouri, the in-state school, pushing for him at the very, very end. I think you'll see something similar with Decorian Moore. But Texas is one of the schools that's stayed after him even after he committed to LSU. And I think the prospects of playing with Arch Manning and, playing in the Stark offense really attracts these kinds of big-time wide receivers. He's the number one guy I think Texas is prioritizing on offense in the 2025 cycle.
Gotcha. Yeah. My next question, obviously Kelvin Banks is going to be departing next year, most likely, and to enter the draft. So is there anyone at tackle or just on the offensive line that you've got your eye on right now?
Yes. My number 2 guy on my wish list is Michael Fasusi. He's an offensive tackle out of Lewisville, Texas, at Lewisville High School. He is a 5-star prospect, and he's a guy that Texas needs to get in this class. As you mentioned, Kelvin Banks will be departing for the NFL, barring some catastrophic injury. They're going to need another. Obviously, they have Brandon Baker coming in. That's great. They still have Cam Williams, who's going to start at right tackle this year. So they've got tackle talent right now in the program, but they're going to need to get a guy. And I think you've seen Kyle Flood has a proven track record. Michael Fasusi is a guy that really likes Texas, but he also really likes Oklahoma. I think this could be a Texas-Oklahoma battle. I think you could see A&M possibly get in there, but it's hard with a new coach because Mike Elko probably doesn't have as good of a relationship as Sark or Brent Venables has with Michael Fasusi, as they've been recruiting him now for 1 or 2 years ongoing. He is nasty in the run game, just nasty. Powerful run blocker, well-balanced, good center of gravity. Now, he's in high school and he could still add 20 to 30 pounds of strength to his frame, which I think he will once you get him on campus and you put him in the strength training program. But he's got tons of upside as an offensive tackle at the next level. He's an NFL kind of player if he fulfills his potential.
Yeah, 6'4", 285. I mean, for most NFL linemen, that's 300. But if he's that mobile in the run game, I don't know if you really want to, lose that mobility.
I'll send you his tape. You can go watch his huddle. It's a bunch of him putting guys on their asses. That's what his huddle tape is.
Yeah.
So I think you'll be really impressed. But yeah, he's the number one target on the offensive line for 2025.
All right. Yeah. Now over to the defense. I think obviously there's been a huge surge in Texas getting front seven players in the transfer portal and in recruiting, but I want to focus on the cornerback position in particular. Who at the cornerback position catches your eye?
Cornerback for 2025, especially in the state of Texas, is real interesting. My number one guy is Dorian Brew. First of all, that's a really cool name, Dorian Brew. He's a cornerback from Conroe, Texas, at Conroe High School. Lengthy kid, good build, rangy corner, really good in coverage, good ball skills. I think he's a 5-star, at least by some services. And, there are other guys too at the corner position. It's a position I really haven't dug into as much, to be honest with you, yet for 2025, just because of the secondary class that Texas brought in 2024. But no, I think Sark and this staff will continue to prioritize stacking talent at the quarterback position. And so I think Dorian Brew's high up on that list, and there are a couple other guys that, could be up there as well. But I think Devin Sanchez is the number one corner in the state of Texas. Right now, he's committed to Ohio State. And I would have said him, but it's Ohio State's got a good thing going up there. And Texas will continue. They don't give up on recruitments. They'll continue to push for that kid. And maybe they'll be fortunate enough to flip him. But, I think they'll go after Dorian Brew and a couple others. What stands out about Dorian Brew, in my opinion, is just his overall size profile. I think he's a guy who projects as a NFL player at some point. Maybe not a day one guy. We'll see about that, but it's really hard to tell with corners. He could be a real good player.
Yeah, high school it's a completely different game when it comes to playing cornerback. So that'll be interesting to see for sure. Last one. I guess I'd rather just hear you relay your list than me say another question.
Okay. Well, my number one guy Texas needs to get in 2025 on defense is DJ Sanders. He's a defensive tackle from Belleville, Texas, Belleville High School. I want you to watch this kid on tape. I'll send you his huddle highlights, but unstoppable interior. He's the exact player Texas has been dying to get the defensive tackle position through the high school ranks for years, and they've fallen a little bit short each and every time. Of course, there's a defensive line conversation we're going to have soon because Texas just hired a new defensive line coach. There's some controversy about it because it's kind of an unconventional hire. It's not the way most people thought Sark would go. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole because we could be here for the next 30 minutes. We'll do that maybe in our next episode. But he's a guy that they need to prioritize high up on their list in 2025. Words don't do it justice. You have to go watch his tape, but unstoppable interior bull rush, naturally explosive, quick off the ball for a guy his size, extremely disruptive in the run game, outstanding upper body and core strength, just elite traits. And if you're asking me what he projects as at the college level, it's a multi-year starter at that 3 technique, and with the versatility to play some nose. I mean, he could be like Texas's dominant defensive line force on the interior. He could be like, I mean, I don't have any comparisons right at the top of my head, but he's the guy. Texas needs to get him. I think you can make the argument he's the Colin Simmons of this class. You have to get him. You can't lose him.
Yeah. I think defensive tackle. It showed this year. You can cover up a lot of different deficiencies if you have an elite defensive line. And those 2 defensive tackles we had this year, Sweat and Murphy, I think we're going to see both of them go to the NFL and do well, and probably be late first round, maybe early second round picks. And then, I mean, if they go to the league and do well, I think that'll do wonders in terms of those defensive line prospects. Just being like, I mean, Texas is churning out defensive linemen. Once we get that ball rolling, we're going to see them start to commit to Texas.
If you see, Brandon Brown's a guy I didn't talk about, but he's committed. He's already committed. He's one of the 5 guys committed in this 2025 cycle already from the state of Florida. If they get a guy like Brandon Brown and then they pair him with a guy like DJ Sanders, along with a couple other guys they're going after, defensive tackle could finally be like a strength in this upcoming recruiting class. It wasn't really a strength in the state of Texas for the 2025 for the 2024 cycle. The defensive tackle position, it just wasn't a great year for those kind of prospects in the state of Texas. This year, though, it's a much stronger defensive tackle class, and I think you're going to see Texas really go after these guys hard because you got to start stacking elite talent at that position going into the SEC. Not that Texas doesn't have good talent right now, but you're going to need to stack more of it. You can't. And I think, actually moving into the SEC with that SEC logo will do a lot for them moving forward at the defensive tackle position. Those elite defensive tackles want to play in the SEC. And now that Texas has shown that they can develop and put, defensive tackles into the first and second rounds of the NFL draft, as that's where we expect Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat to be drafted, that'll help with it as well.
Yeah, definitely. Anything else you wanted to touch on or add?
Well, there's one more guy that I have on my wish list, Riley Pettijohn. He's a inside linebacker from McKinney High School. McKinney High School being he is a teammate of Xavier Filsaime, the 5-star safety that Texas got late in the 2024 cycle. Really talented player, highly instinctive linebacker, exceptional open field tackler, takes good angles in run pursuit, really smart player. And he has also played safety in high school and needs to fill out his frame, but he has that ability to cover as a linebacker, which I think is unique. And so he's like one of my number one guys at the inside linebacker position. And Texas is going to need, after really going after inside linebacker hard in the 2023 cycle, they only took one linebacker in the 2024 cycle. So they're going to need to up their numbers in the number of inside linebackers that they take in 2025 because Anthony Hill will have this year and then next year, and then he's off to the NFL. So you're going to need to have stockpile talent at that position. So that's one position. Like if we were going by position, inside linebacker and defensive tackle are up there as priorities for 2025.
Definitely. Yeah.
Anything else?
No, not really, man. I'm feeling pretty good about how this episode turned out. I think we got to a lot of information in a pretty short amount of time. Um, I think for me, it was a good, precursor to kind of learn about some of these guys, and I'll definitely be diving into the tape over the coming days for sure. And then once we get back to it, I'll have a little bit more to say on these guys.
Well, we'll get back to the 2025 guys here very soon, but over the next couple of days, I want you to take a look at the huddle tapes of some of the 2024 guys because we're going to go into our grades for each position for the 2024 cycle here pretty soon. So I can send you those huddle tapes. They're like 5 minutes each player. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
really nothing too much. And then we'll go from there. We are going to have I don't know about weekly recruiting, but probably bi-weekly recruiting segments here on Dit Hole for the next couple of weeks. Just so we can get through, the final signing day, wrap up the 2024 cycle with our grades, and then we'll dive back into 2025. But I think as we do it, you'll really once you start to watch these guys, I think you'll really start to kind of embrace recruiting.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
before we go, I wanted to kind of talk about what the next month or two looks like here on Dit Hole. I've been thinking, and we'll talk about this more off camera, but the Senior Bowl is next Saturday. And so a lot of the top draft prospects for the upcoming 2024 draft are going to be playing in that game. Devondre Sweat, Byron Murphy, Jalen Ford. I believe Ryan Watts will be too. There are some Texas guys playing in that game. Bo Nix. So maybe we'll have some Senior Bowl content for you this week. I have no idea. I don't know what we'll do with it yet, but we'll be kicking off our draft coverage, and we'll have draft coverage probably starting here in the next 2 or 3 weeks, regardless. We're also going to have lots of college basketball and college baseball stuff like we had today, particularly college basketball. And that's where I wanted to get to. I'll get to that in a minute. And then we'll be wrapping up some of our Portal Nugget stuff for at least right now. And then once we get to February, it'll kind of be a dead period in the portal. The portal's closed. We haven't really seen any Michigan guys enter yet. So we'll see where that goes. But for the most part, I think Texas is done in the portal for right now until after spring, where I think you'll just see some natural attrition. You'll see some guys leave, and then you might see them bring in another defensive tackle. I think you'll see that for sure.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll see them go after another corner. They did not get Jabbar Muhammad. He committed to Oregon earlier this afternoon, which was kind of expected. But
I think I jinxed it with that thumbnail.
there will be, I think, some other corners possibly that enter the portal after spring that Texas can go after. It's a bunch of stuff, but we'll keep you occupied here on Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. And final note before we go, next Saturday, like today was awesome in college basketball. Like you had Iowa State beat Kansas in a really close game, 79-75. They're now undefeated at home. Iowa State's a really good team. They beat Kansas. You had Texas Tech beat Oklahoma on the road by 1 in a really close game. You had Duke squeak by Clemson in a controversial ending. Foul call at the end, 2 free throws by Tyrese Proctor won that game, 72-71. In the wildest game of the day, you had Baylor and TCU go at it in 3 overtimes. The final score of that game, 105-102.
Dang.
TCU wins
Three overtimes?
3 overtimes.
Sheesh.
Excellent game. One of the best college basketball games I've watched in a while. And Baylor now is on a 3-game losing streak. That's just life in the Big 12.
Yeah.
But next weekend is going to be even better. Like, that's just a snapshot of this weekend. But next weekend, all I really have to say is number 4 Houston at number 7 Kansas. That speaks for itself.
Yeah.
Number 12 Duke at number 13 North Carolina. It's Duke,
Ooh.
North Carolina.
Yeah. Yeah.
Number 23 Iowa State at number 15 Baylor. That's good. That's a great game. And then number 5 Tennessee at number 6 Kentucky.
Yeah, and Iowa State probably will be higher in the rankings by the time that game starts too, and Baylor might even be lower.
Most likely, but it's still a great game. You also have Texas will go to Fort Worth to play TCU. You've got Auburn playing Ole Miss. Ole Miss is off to a 17-3 start under Chris Beard this year. And they just beat Texas A&M today. You have some other great games too, but really all I needed to say was 5:30 Duke at North Carolina, and then 7:30 Tennessee at Kentucky. I love this sport.
Yeah.
But that's that. So we'll talk some college basketball. Texas plays Houston on Monday. They obviously lose to BYU today. Do you have any thoughts on that game? Anything you want to mention?
I wasn't really able to watch it. I'll have to go back and watch it whenever I get a chance.
Yeah, Houston will be tough. It's a quick turnaround. They're coming to the Moody Center, so you get it at home. But they're a tough team. They crushed Kansas State today. And Kansas State is a good team. All right, that'll do it for today's episode of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. Thank you guys for tuning in. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the content. Thank you to Emmy for sitting through some baseball and recruiting talk. And we'll see you guys hopefully soon, this week for sure, for another episode of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. So until then, hook 'em.
Hook 'em. Peace out, y'all.